I know that this holiday period can be a little bit stressful, so for today I have created a video that is really going to be very suiting. We are going to paint together these watercolor leaves. You can really take any color available and we are really going to play a lot with wet in wet. This is going to be a very relaxing video. I really hope you're going to enjoy it. My name is Luisa and this is the Lulu Blue Studio. Let's start painting these leaves together. For this last tutorial of 2023, I've decided to create a sort of pattern all over the page with some loose style leaves. To create this composition, you can use any brush you have available. I am using in particular a flat brush from Princeton, and the main objective to relax for this video is to create leaves and add on the first layer of the leaves through some wet and wet technique different colors that are going to blend while the first layer is still wet. I've decided to start creating the first leaves here in brown color, just because I felt like brown was a nice warm color to use in this December video. But you can use any other color that you feel like and that you have on your color palette. This is my brown color burnt umber from Schmincke, and I'm mainly using the belly of this brush and turning the brush to create this pointy tip of the leaf. I'm using different concentrations of this burnt umber color, and I'm creating these leaves also in different sizes. My main idea is then to change brush. You can also use the same brush if you feel like, but I wanted to have more control onto this second step, and with a round brush in size 6 from Princeton, I am adding some contrasting color. In this case, this is a gouache color in violet, and I'm adding these brush strokes where the leaves are still wet. In this way, the gouache is going to blend with the first layer in brown color of the leaves, and by the end, when the whole composition is going to be completely dry, there are going to be beautiful blending effects on these leaves. I particularly like how these two contrasting colors, purple and brown or yellow ochre, are blending together, and you can use the same type of contrasting colors, or of course you can use any other color and blend it with the color of your first layer of the leaves. I encourage you to try very different color mixtures and see what comes out of this experiment. In this moment, with my round brush in size 6, I kept adding a few stems in order to give a direction to these leaves. And then, taking the back of my flat brush, I'm using the tip to create some veins. These are just adding some pressure into the leaves, and since the leaves are still wet, adding some pressure will allow the paper to have these veins and then the color also to blend into these areas. I have used a similar technique for the video of the irises that I'm going to link here, and you can really have fun and test this technique using the back of any brush that you have available. What I like the most about paintings like these ones is that there is no rule you need to follow. You can really use any color you have available. You can really decide to use the concentration or the color value for your leaves as you prefer. You can add into the mixture some gouache, as I am doing with the purple gouache, or you can still use some watercolor paints. The leaves can have any shape, and also they can go onto the paper on any direction you prefer to have them leading the eyes of the observer. I tell you more that this is a type of exercise that I practice often when I'm looking for some new creativity and when I want to relax but I don't want to create necessarily flowers in the typical way. So this type of exercise is something that I encourage you to do even when you just want to find some fresh inspiration or you want to test some different, for example, color mixtures and see, for example, if they can work for your paintings or not. Of course, you don't have every time to paint leaves. Leaves was a subject that I picked for this video, but you can also just, for example, paint some circle, some triangular shapes or some blobs or any shape you want to test, and you can add different colors through the wet on wet technique. At this point, I've decided to switch up a little bit this pattern of these leaves, and I've decided to start to create a few leaves where instead of having a brown base, I pick a little bit more yellow. So this base is created with a little bit of lemon yellow that I have in my color palette. I still create these leaves in different sizes and shapes, but I then decide to add into this yellow mixture different colors, not the dark purple that I have used in the beginning, but a little bit different gouache colors in order to create a botanical composition with a different color scheme. And so, for example, in this case, I'm mixing into the first layer of yellow of these leaves a little bit of Scarlet Red, which is a watercolor paint, but also a little bit of magenta, which is in the set of my gouache paints. And so I let these different colors to blend into the yellow layer of these leaves. In order to create a cohesive composition, I've then decided to add a touch of brown onto the leaves that I'm creating in the upper part of this page too. And therefore I started to mix a little bit of burnt umber with a little bit of yellow ochre and lemon yellow. If you don't have any gouache color available, you can clearly recreate the same type of composition and letting your watercolor paints blend through wet on wet technique in the same way as I am doing with the gouache. You just know that with the watercolor you will have layers of paints that are not as opaque as what you can obtain with gouache. So this is going to be the only difference, and you can still have fun creating something similar even just with watercolor paints. To add some more contrasting brush strokes, I'm adding into the mixture of magenta in gouache a little bit of also white gouache. Therefore, I'm allowing this lighter color to blend with the first layer of paint with which I've created these leaves. I always like to add these veins using the back of my flat brush, because this back of this flat brush is quite pointy. You can add veins in this type to all of the leaves that you are creating, or you can also just create these veins just on some leaves and leave some other leaves without veins at all. When I keep adding these leaves, I look at how many white spaces and where do I have these white spaces on the page. And therefore, considering these areas, I decide where to add other leaves and in which shape and in which size I want these leaves to be. For example, in this case, I noticed that in this left central area of this composition, there are some white spaces, but they are not so big, so I add a few small yellow leaves. Instead, in the upper part of this page, I noticed that there is a bigger white area, empty area, and therefore here I started to create bigger leaves. If you are relaxing watching this video, or if you are enjoying painting along, press like down below. And if you wanted to support me with the creation of these videos, please subscribe to my channel because it really helps me to create free content for you to watch. Also, remember that you can subscribe to my newsletter and download for free the Beginner's Guide to Watercolor Flower Painting, the ebook I wrote for you, where I tell you all the secrets that watercolor beginner artists need to know when they start to paint loose style flowers. You can download your free guide by clicking on the link in the description down below. I like sometimes to add to the leaves some brush strokes with the flat brush. Sometimes instead I like to add these details through wet on wet technique with the round brush in size 6. The flat brush and the round brush, of course, are different brushes, and I really have the feeling that I can obtain different effects if I wanted to use, for example, the tip of my round brush or, for example, the side of my flat brush. And therefore, I encourage you to also try different brushes that you have available and feel the different effects that you can achieve. I really like how the colors, the warm colors in the upper part of this composition are really sort of introducing the colors in the lower part of the composition. And so you can either start looking at this composition, this botanical composition from the upper part of the page down to the bottom, or you can also look at this botanical composition from the lower right corner of the page and look up at the leaves up to the corner in the upper part of this page. And so with exercises like this one, you not only practice, for example, the blendings of colors, the wet on wet technique, wet on dry technique, and color mixtures, but you can also practice how to give a flow to your compositions overall. And, for example, where to add bigger elements, in this case leaves, compared to smaller leaves, and how to give a balance to the composition overall. In this tutorial, I have added mainly 2 or maybe sometimes 3 layers of paint. You can, of course, practice more and add even additional layers through the wet on wet technique. But for example, you can also experiment and add brush strokes through the wet on dry technique. And for example, add a few veins that really give a strong character to these elements. As a final touch, I am just trying to give a more detailed definition to the branch that is connecting all of the leaves, and therefore I'm mixing a little bit of burnt umber and some violet from my gouache set in order to create a few brush strokes into these branches that I've created initially with watercolor. For this reason, I'm using my round brush in size 6 from Silver Black Velvet, because this brush has such a fine tip that I am able to obtain such a fine line that no other brush that I have can help me with. We are reaching the end of this tutorial. I really hope that you enjoyed painting with me and that you find some time to relax. I hope you find this video, this type of tutorial, very inspiring, because it is inspiring for me to practice this type of brush strokes and compositions. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope to see you in a new tutorial in 2024.